Despite more physical stores going back up and welcoming customers again after travel restrictions ease, a lot of Filipinos still opt to shop online. What is the future of the digital economy in the country and across Southeast Asia? Let's get the insights now of Facebook and Meta Philippines country head John Rubio and Bain & Company's Benett Aquino, who is joining us from Singapore. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program. John, let me start off with you. During the pandemic, people turned to everything online, from attending meetings to buying meals and paying bills. Will the digital economy and e-commerce remain the business model of the future?
Thanks again, Rico, and good evening. Thanks for having us. Great question as the world opens up. And the question is, yes, but it's an evolving model. And, Benett can share a bit more stats from the study that we did together. But what you're seeing is as retail stores started opening up, we talked before about, the amount of purchases that shifted online. What we're seeing is a rebalancing. So from a perspective of eventual purchases, you're seeing almost a 50-50, where before it was primarily skewed towards online, you're seeing a rebound of purchases at actual offline outlets. But what's interesting is if you look at the marketing funnel, all the way from discovery and awareness to consideration, those still are largely and heavily, from a perspective of a consumer, still digital. You discover stuff on video. You look at and consider products based on, influencers or creators that you follow. And, I'm sure Benett has some stats from our study to share for
all right.
topic.
So Benett, what numbers can you share with us?
Yeah, and Rico, the digital economy really has undergone some evolution, right? As you know, during the pandemic, we saw some unprecedented e-commerce growth. In fact, between 2020 and 2021, e-commerce gross merchandise value grew 130% in a single year, right? Mm-hmm. Now, as we move beyond the pandemic, as John said, we do expect an evolution. We do expect steady growth, but less dramatic. In fact, it already tapered down this year to 19% from last year. And the main driver of that really was that as the economy reopened, consumers had more options to begin shopping in person again. So, while online purchases went down for categories like groceries, we still do see that they went up for categories like baby care and electronics. So in some ways, Filipinos are actually rediscovering their sweet spot between online and offline shopping. And the outlook really remains positive that much of these e-commerce gains will be sustained through the next 5 years. We're forecasting a growth of 20% growth through 2027.
And of course, John, e-commerce though, despite the shift with the opening of the economy, it's still a major force to reckon with, and because it offers a whole world of options, no? But of course, there's also a downside. Authenticity can be compromised, and DTI says in 2021, there were tens of thousands of complaints against online businesses that sold deceptive, counterfeit, or pirated products. You have a major marketplace on Facebook. How are you trying to regulate this?
I think from a perspective, trust is really important, right? When you trust someone to, purchase and you provide them your funds, you're expecting a certain degree of service. So certain things are happening that sort of signal this trust. When you look at things like the importance and the rise of, we'll call it the creator or influencer economy, you're buying something, let's say from, a food perspective, or you're buying something in clothing, you like to listen to people you trust and a perspective of somehow people you've dealt with before. That second piece is particularly important with what we saw in the rise in messaging. So what I mean by that is, almost every Filipino uses Messenger to communicate. What we started seeing was to sort of build this trust was companies, both large and also really small, whether it's a neighborhood store to the largest online retailers, starting to create this one-to-one connection. So that what happens is you can discuss and almost connect with the businesses before you entrust them with your money.
But how are you also protecting your users from these scammers? Because now we have the likes of phishing, money scams, third-party seller scams.
So from a perspective of how to protect, I think there's multiple. One is education, because a lot of times people need to be careful. Like, don't immediately trust every seller you see. So which is why I mentioned earlier, you need trusted voices. You need to sort of create this connection from, let's say, a messaging perspective. So you can sort of gauge is this someone that you can trust. Beyond that, throughout our platform, we have multiple tools to do things like report faulty transactions, report scams, and so forth, which we act on with all seriousness.
And Benett, with the tremendous growth in the internet economy, have players forgotten about cybersecurity risks to protect consumers? Are companies also investing in cybersecurity?
No, absolutely. And that is the key question, right, Rico? I think one of the things that we have realized as e-commerce continues to grow is that businesses themselves need to step up, right? Cybersecurity certainly is something that we believe there's much headroom for further investment, but it spans much more than that, Rico. In our view, the immediate implication here is that businesses really have to be prepared to keep in step with this consumer evolution, right? Security is one thing, but Filipino consumers are evolving in many, many other ways. They have higher expectations. They seek more engagement. They're more open to experimentation. They're early adopters, right? So among other things, businesses must understand what great security is, what a great experience is. They need to make sure that their supply chain is secure and efficient, and they have to continue to innovate and obsess over their customers. If they don't, someone else will.
And Benett, how does the Philippines stand in terms of cybersecurity versus our ASEAN neighbors?
As far as cybersecurity, we are probably in the early nascent stage, Rico, right? More broadly, when you compare us to the rest of Southeast Asia, actually the key thing to note here is that we actually have the second largest digital population. So the implication of cybersecurity compared to our digital population is actually quite stark. It is definitely an area that we believe needs further investment, right? But beyond these differences, there are probably a lot more similarities than differences between us and Southeast Asia. I think with companies like with markets like Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam, we continue to see ourselves needing to evolve both as businesses but also as markets, as we keep in lockstep with the evolution of our consumers.
And John, where does Facebook and Meta see digital commerce evolving further in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think from an evolution perspective, I always like to bring it back to trends that we're starting to see and how companies can leverage that. So we talked earlier about the funnel, right? Like from discovery and awareness, what we're seeing is really important there is the emergence of video. So like right now, Mark Zuckerberg mentioned in our recent investor briefing that half of the time spent is now on video. And a lot of times what people do is they discover, for example, products and services. So 1/3 of people from our survey leverage video in order to discover and know more about services. The second trend that we saw happen over the past 2 years was literally the rise of the creator and influencer community. Back to your earlier question, which is about how you build trust. So when we see things evolve, it's how do companies leverage video to get discovered, right? And that video could be on Facebook Watch, it could be on YouTube, could be on TikTok, could be on Facebook or Instagram Reels. How do you build that? How do you then use the creator influencer community to sort of influence that? And then how do you close the sale? Instead of, for example, having a 1:many, how can you create 1:1 conversions with the last trend, which is a massive shift towards business messaging? Because like 1 out of every 2 people have said that they message a business like fairly recently.
Benett, in terms of data and numbers, where does Bain see digital commerce in the Philippines over the next 5 years?
We definitely expect digital commerce to remain a key part of digital consumers' lives. Currently today, 75% of consumers' pre and post purchase journeys are spent in online channels. We are quite in league with Southeast Asia in our online purchasing frequency. We see it at 4.5 incidences per month compared to Southeast Asia 4.9. We do expect digital commerce, as I mentioned, to continue to grow. We expect gross merchandise value to continue to grow by 20% over the next few years. We expect a balancing of categories where consumers spend more time purchasing online on some categories versus others. But more than that, what we're also seeing is actually quite an exciting trend, Rico, where the Philippines in particular is seeing some early traction when it comes to the metaverse, right? In the past year, we saw that 80% of our respondents actually perused at least one metaverse-related technology in the past year. And the reason why that excites us a lot is because this type of technology could really build bridges to more immersive technologies in the future. And the fact that the Filipinos are, again, early adopters when it comes to this type of service is something that we at Bain and I'm sure John at Meta are looking truly forward to.
Well, metaverse is another topic that we should discuss about in another edition of The Final Word. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Facebook and Meta Philippines country head John Rubio and Bain & Company's Benett Aquino joining us from Singapore.